Hi, and welcome to yet another episode of the New Space India podcast. We're here at the offices of SatSure and KaleidEO, and basically we're going to talk about how SatSure has grown to be a 120-member team and is now looking to operate its own constellation of satellites. Today we have here Arpan, who is leading the KaleidEO team. And Arpan, thank you so much for spending the time with us, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, NP, again for meeting us in our offices and taking this time to kind of share your thoughts and views along with us. Let's have an entertaining discussion on this.
Right. So let's begin with what SatSure initially started with, and how the journey has gone into KaleidEO. So basically, I would love to have you talk about the inception of SatSure and the mission that SatSure began with, and then you can maybe follow up that with how that has led into this idea of having an Earth observation system.
Okay, let's rewind back to 2017, I think. So Pradeep and I go all the way back from IST days. I knew him, but unfortunately during that time when SatSure was being set up, I was in the US, and but I was always in the following kind of a path of the SatSure culture. And Pradeep along with Abhishek and Rashmit kind of came together to lay the foundation of SatSure. And they were initially just exploring, I think, the agricultural space and how can they bring satellite data into that system. They didn't have any products, basically. Let's be honest about it. They were still finding their path around that. But yeah, through trial and error, through discovery, through talking to customers, through figuring out various use cases, hustling, working out on various unique problems that are relevant to the Indian demography and the situations of say marginal farmers and how to bring credit. So it all like culminated together in about, I would say, 2 odd years it took to, by the end of 2019, SatSure had its first product in terms of some form of agri insurance lending portfolio management service. It was more of a service and not of a product. So what they did was they kind of went to the banks and said, hey, we can integrate into a backend. We can bring the remote sensing data. We can analyze the fields. We can give you what is the risk associated with this XYZ portfolio of a farmer. Now, then the rest is history, I guess. SatSure has gone tremendously. It has multiplied, and now, as of now, we are a strong member of 120. But as of last year and possibly as of this date, we were a team of oddly 30 odd members. So the transition has been very rapid. The transition has been very multifold, and we are slowly discovering our foothold and place in the industry. But it is happy to note that we have established our products in this thing that we are now recognized by the bureaus, we are recognized by the all the banks and portfolios, and even to the extent that they have invested in our journey as well. And coming to the next part of it, of the growth journey was we have all this data, we have understood what fits into the agri segment, but there is a whole 1,000 other applications in the remote sensing world to solve, and we obviously do understand and are humble about it that we cannot solve all of them. But let us figure out what's next. And the next obviously was there is a huge demand in the infrastructure monitoring segment, and that's where as of last year we started exploring what is the business canvas. Let's try and build something around that, and that's where the journey took us into understanding the pain points in infrastructure monitoring, in acquiring drone data. A lot of customers came back to us and said, hey, can you monitor this but at this price point? Now this is a very unique challenge in the developing and so-called transitioning part of the world, is that you have to have solutions in a specific segment and a specific price point to kind of close the business case. Otherwise, you cannot apply the same unit economics as goes in the West or in Europe for that matter. So yeah, it took us a good time to understand these. We did our discovery, and we learned that to solve these large area analytic problems, it is important that we have access to our own data, because the price point at which data is available from standard commercial operators and things like that is challenging to close the business case. And therefore we started working on two aspects simultaneously. One was building on the high resolution analytics portfolio, which we call as SatSure Skies. And next was, yes, working on a unique payload that can integrate, or basically what we call today as vertical integration, along with the products that SatSure currently builds. Is how do we create a unique payload that kind of merges seamlessly into that product itself. And therefore that led to the origin of KaleidEO, where our idea is to have as the first phase of KaleidEO's growth journey would be to launch a fleet of 4 high resolution multispectral optical satellites. I'm talking high resolution in the sense of around 1 meter. And obviously it would cater to very high resolution and high swath analytics problems, which is so-called holy grail of remote sensing, and how do you capture a data in one pass and things like that, right? So yeah, that has been our growth journey, and we have I have my friend and colleague, both from my bachelor days, Akash, kind of working with me along with Pradeep in leading this new subsidiary that we have formed.
Right. Thank you so much for that explanation. So I would love to have your insights into, what do you think is the bridge between like the upstream and the downstream? Because today I think there's a lot of gap between what the upstream companies can produce as satellites. Sometimes people go with the form factor. They say, okay, what can I do in a CubeSat? Then they try to sell that imagery. Or on the other side, sometimes people look at either building a 1 meter resolution satellite, or they may not care about the swath because they care about the resolution, and they want the satellite to be still smaller because of the aperture size and so on, right? So there are all of these sometimes misconceptions, because people either want to limit the cost per satellite, or the price of the imagery because the cost of the satellite is lower. But is that what the market really wants? What does really people in the end user segment want? And obviously, because you guys are already working with the end user segment to a large extent, I'm sure that you have an understanding of what the end user really wants. So what are your learnings in this process, and what can you share around these topics?
Okay. Let me start with the concept of that. Finally, customer or the target client, that whatever in the commercial, it may be commercial, it may be institutional, it may be so-called open source data, whatever the solution. But finally, it's a problem statement, right? At the end of it, all they care about is whether you are able to solve their problem statement. If that is not solved, no matter how much data I have, or maybe the flood of data that is existing in the market, yes, no doubt we have a lot of data in the market, but is it ready to be consumed? Is it analytic ready? Then I come to I typically take this reference. Do we have enough translators and product builders around it? So when I say translators, I need remote sensing folks, that capability building inside a team. When I say kind of product builders, obviously it has to be data analysts and a product development team. So unless we have this entire stack of a data that is obviously consumable, a translator, and a data product builder around it, we will never be able to close that entire loop of delivering a solution to a client or a customer. So much of our journey has always been backward. Is first we go talk to the client, we understand their problem statements. Then we define a product, an envelope under which we can work around it. Then we kind of, work out backwards in what would those mean into a remote sensing terminology, i.e. what are those technical specifications that would make meaningful contribution to that product building. Because gone are the days when service would make sense. Like, you cannot continue as a service oriented company for very long in the EO industry. We have well established that. A lot of people have tried, and not to kind of a recent EO company kind of folded up as an example of that segment. And yes, so coming to that, we have to understand that we have to build products, something that can be verticalized. There is a different concept, right? You have to verticalize across a solution, and you still have to do a vertical integration, like we are doing. Is like we are going from analytics back into upstream, right? I going from downstream to upstream. That transition across from building an application layer, a full engine behind it to kind of power that software, and obviously data capacity and data sovereignty in from a not from a national or country perspective, but sovereignty from a program or a company's perspective, right? So once we have accessed all these with meaningful meshing across the different layers, then only you have a complete solution, or so-called holistic solution. That would be my take. And what we have done is in KaleidEO, transitioned by understanding obviously the high-res analytics segment. We have taken a thorough survey with our customers. We have sat in their offices and learned from them what is it they're trying to solve. We defined the specs of our satellites and the sensors that we are going to send as part of the first fleet. Based on those inputs, we have not gone the other way and defined, hey, this is my resolution, these are my bands, take it or leave it. This is not an approach that's going to work anymore. You cannot have data thrusted down your throat. Let's be blunt about it. You will have to work the other way. You have to understand, talk to the people who are on the ground who face these challenges, and define why you want to, and justify why you want a satellite or a sensor in space.
Right. Again, that was really interesting to learn from you. The follow-up that I really wanted to ask you is, you said that you're looking to establish 4 satellites. 4 satellites is still, a reasonable number of satellites to have to get some data, but not for very high frequency kind of applications, because you probably need a lot more satellites for very high frequency kind of applications that are out there. So is this kind of a pilot phase that you're looking at to validate certain things, or to then move into a more high frequency kind of a data acquisition, or do you believe it satisfies all the initial product market fit that you want to probably achieve with these 4 satellites? What is the roadmap where you're looking to establish with these 4 satellites? What are you trying to prove with these 4 satellites?
All right. So coming to the 4 satellites, we did not come up with the idea of 4 satellites. We just went with the kind of the scaling potential and the market demand that we see, both from the SatSure's internal requirement and its growth trajectory, which is essentially feeding first as the primary demand for KaleidEO itself. So that is part A. The part B is what the geographies we are trying to go into, what are the new product launches that we are aiming for in the time, and how do we see the SKY's portfolio, the high resolution analytics growing. So based on that, we kind of came to the idea that 4 satellites are good enough to get the coverage that we want with the necessary repetitivity, because what you want at the end of the day is not to visit a point 6 times a day. In the commercial space, let's be clear about it. There are very few applications. There is a very niche market for it, and there are operators like Planet and those people. They are doing it well. I don't need to be going and trying to build my solutions for that market. But if our fleet is very dedicated to commercial applications, civilian applications at a price point that is affordable. So the unit economics drives the number of satellites, and obviously the coverage and the repetitivity demand that they have. So most of the applications that we kind of surveyed or understood during our initial phase was you would probably need change monitoring assessment every 15 odd days. So with 4 satellites and the resolution and the swath that we have from our constellation, we can give analytics ready data on a repeat basis every 9 to 10 days. And if you so need optical information i.e. Not analytics necessarily. You have daily repeativity already with 4 satellites. That's the USP of our fleet, is that we have married or been very successful in marrying this high resolution, which is at 1 meter, with a SWOT of 65 kilometers. So when you combine these kind of numbers from very low Earth orbit of about 375 kilometers that we are targeting for, you are able to get a good repeativity, a very reasonable repeativity in terms of both consumable data that we can access. And that's very, very important. We are making that distinction very clear, that the data needs to be consumable. We are not asking for 15-degree off node data, which is not analytics ready. You cannot feed that into a product and expect a solution out of it.
Again, a very interesting answer, and I guess your experience speaks, while you are talking about this. Again, obviously trying to build something on the upstream is a lot harder with the uncertainties of space, that brings along with it. And obviously when you're doing something downstream, you have the ability to correct on the fly and do all of these runs where you can do a lot of trials. You can fix a lot of bugs in the front end, back end, all kinds of things, right? So what is your execution strategy? And given that you are also based here in Bangalore, there's also the pool of talent that you need who understand either building cameras or satellites and all of these things, right? So what is it that you are today looking to put together as a part of the team and the execution so that KaleidEO, the starting of it, is obviously successful?
Okay, let's break it down into 2 parts. So KaleidEO is building obviously the Argus satellites, which we are calling as the first fleet. But that fleet also has this unique capacity of doing a large area imaging capacity per day. We are talking about 1 million square kilometers per day in terms of imaging capacity, but also utilizing AI on the edge. So as SatSure has been developing its capacity across its journey of using AI ML to derive insights, we are transitioning from the phase of using it on ground, on cloud, to space. So we are this unique juncture of where we are building a both hardware and software capability inside the team in KaleidEO. So we are dedicating some resources, a lot of resources, I would say, towards CapEx building or building technological capacity in high resolution imaging, which is the payload. But also, since we have this AI ML component, we spend a lot of our bandwidth, so to say, in developing these algorithms that can extract the maximum out of that imaging capacity, because not all of it is downloadable, right? We understand that the entire satellite industry is bottlenecked by the amount of data that you can downlink. So there is a specific amount of ConOps trade-off, concept of operations trade-off that you can do per day. So once we have traded off and maintained the balance, we went around understanding our priorities and kind of build that capacity both in India and outside, in-house and through partnerships. So let me be very clear that we are not restricted in terms of how we are strategically building the solution or kind of responding to the demand on that. Wherever we have found talent, we have partnered or tried to get them on board on the team. And we currently work with a lot of consultants and consultancy houses in executing a lot of these payload hardware challenges and building on the expertise of the new space community, very specifically in Europe right now. Our opticals, our electronics, our AI ML, the computing platform itself, all of these are through partnerships. What we have in-house as of today in execution is we define, design, and execute the program through this. So we do not have the assets or the infrastructure in SatSure to do all the hardware heavy integration, testing, and all that. So all of this is happening through partnerships.
A very interesting approach, because you are de-risking, and I guess you have very well defined what you really need and how do you approach this to be successful as such. So just further moving on, let's take a scenario where KaleidEO is starting to image, and you have these satellites that are going up into space. But maybe before that, if it would be great to know the kind of the timelines that you have in mind, because obviously today, building 4 satellites takes time, realizing them, launching them, given the uncertainties around launch industry that is still existing. So maybe we'll address that first and look at what kind of timelines you have for all of this, and then we'll probably move further on.
Yeah, schedule. I would say statistics prove that almost all the projects never hit schedule, right? So we are very aware of that. But currently, the state of the art technology and the approach that we have taken, which is satellite as a service, right? And in that, we are acquiring the satellites from someone, and we are putting our designed and integrated payloads on it and building the capacity in space. So thankfully, the new space ecosystem and the COTS approach, very specifically the COTS approach, has helped us to realize satellites in about 18 months, but not launch included, obviously. So we are looking at about 2 years from now, in which we would be close to a launch pad with the first 2 out of our 4 satellites, because we are launching it in phases, 2 plus 2. The first in the Q4 of 2024, our first launch phase will happen, and following the next quarter we'll have 2 more added onto the fleet. And this execution greatly is supported by a good community in Europe who understand the challenges of the semiconductor industry, accessing the supply chain, logistics, the everything. But we have one good assurance that this is not an issue in the time frame that we have aimed for, and we have commitments from our partners that it can be done. Coming to our payload timeline, what we have established is a de-risking philosophy, like you just talked about. We have approached that in our payload phase also. We are doing aircraft testing as of January next year. Early next year, we will be putting our payload on an aircraft and testing the imaging operations and concept. So that gives us a very good foundation and de-risking the entire mission per se. And we are testing our on-orbit algorithms through our partners also, because a lot of edge platforms are out there in space right now. So all you have to do is push a few codes out there, right? So we have been testing out a bunch of our algorithms, and very soon at the end of this year itself, we'll be testing some of our proprietary AI ML codes which have been developed in-house. Yeah.
From execution standpoint, let's assume that you have all of these assets up in space, and you have all of this data that is coming down. And obviously, 2.5 years, SatSure hopefully would have also doubled, tripled, quadrupled in the process, right? So maybe you have a lot of capacity to absorb all of this information by yourself. Is that the hope, or are you also looking at KaleidEO to be an independent kind of an operator who will also start making this data available to other companies who also want to use this kind of data, right? Because at the end, you're then generating another source for information in the market. And so what is the vision here? Is it more that in 2.5 years, you will have enough capacity to absorb so much of information? Or is it that, let's use this as a launch pad to then be an independent data generation platform as well?
Okay, during this next 2.5 years, we are actively going to build our high resolution analytics portfolio inside KaleidEO itself. What will happen once the constellation launches is the data input, a pipeline, will be seamlessly changed into the Argus feed, so to say. But that does not mean that we would not be intaking other forms of data where data fusion is necessary or insight level fusion is necessary. Barring that, apart from SatSure's captive demand for the agri products and KaleidEO's internal high resolution analytics products, all the archive data primarily would be available for like a standard marketplace. But it has to be kept in mind that this constellation was designed with a very specific intent in mind. It is married for analytics ready products. So if you are a product builder or in the downstream segment who relies on analytics ready data to build your solutions, this is the right platform to partner with us to accept a very easy to use analytics ready data, because we did not design it to just look and observe. We designed it to look and gather information, process it. Obviously, we're doing our products, but we'll be happy to partner and give data and share data to enable the entire ecosystem to benefit and leverage their product building. Because in the end, we have to grow together. The more solutions we unlock together, the more market we tap into. It's a win-win for everyone.
There is obviously all kinds of new data that is up and coming, and KaleidEO, you're focusing on more of the optical side, and today people are doing high resolution SAR, and people are trying to do thermal and so many other new bands, hyperspectral imagery in higher resolution and so on. So what are your generic thoughts around these aspects? Because obviously there is some unique new value that every new data set is bringing, but may not unlock a lot of applications unless it is done at a certain resolution for a lot of the applications, right? So, obviously you have now said that we're starting with the optical side of things and so on. So how do you see this evolving in the market? And, is there also a future where you say that we will diversify into these other bands based on the evolution of this product or so on?
Okay. Let's break it down into two parts. The first part is obviously where do we sit in the entire ecosystem where there are so many data sets available. We see these data sets as complementary to our data, because what we have is just a small piece of the pie in terms of what we can see from space. So we need access to all these data, and thankfully everybody is contributing to it. In India especially, we have a lot of people building for the hyperspectral. Some are on the way to getting SAR capabilities into space very soon, and sensors are being iterated and developed. So all these data streams are fed into our product or the application segment directly, where we do multi-data fusion. We already have done it in the past in SatSure. As the classic example would be our Cygnus, right, which uses optical imagery and SAR imagery, and does AI ML based reconstruction to get data when weather is bad. You have extreme cloud cover, but you can use SAR imagery and take a template of optical imagery from the past to build a so-called re-engineered data. Yes, so similar such approaches would be in our pipeline, and this is part of our technology roadmap also, that we will be building on the software side of segments and product side data fusion capabilities by partnering with suppliers of different data sets. Beyond that, yes, in the future we do have plans to launch other types of sensors, but it will be in collaboration and by judging the right market fit at that point in time, depending on where the industry has moved forward, what is the appetite and what makes more commercial sense. Because we are not targeting 100% of the market to grasp all of it. We want that 80-20 rule where that 20% can solve 20% of the the capabilities can solve 80% of the problems.
That's actually a very good answer, when you look at it as to what people are approaching in different things. So from, what you're saying, everything looks, very well planned and very well thought through. And also you have the demand that is then coming through all of this. From where you stand today, how do you see this market evolving? Because at the end, for every application that you are building, there's a certain ground truthing and the absorption of the solution by a certain end user at the end, and then if it's an enterprise, testing it out with their system and their end customers realizing the value of the whole thing. Is it still early days for Earth observation in terms of achieving scale at enterprise level, or is it already there and it's only about having executing the scale with them, and the bottleneck there is data or so on? What are your thoughts around these things, and how do you see this evolving in the next 3 to 5 years?
Then let me break it down into the themes that I see would play out primarily, or is my prediction at least, is an understanding that the solution has to be verticalized, i.e. you have to go down to a segment in the commercial side. Let's say, for example, infrastructure. You have to do a full holistic vertical integration across that segment in itself, or precision agriculture or climate, because you have to tune the data sets to a specific problem statement. You cannot have encompass one envelope, one big umbrella that can cater to all the segments in industry. It's just not going to work. So once you have this, you will have very specific players coming in trying to verticalize in that segment. So let's say someone tomorrow wants to address only precision agriculture, so they would build sensors or want to have a control over assets and do a backward vertical integration based on the solutions, whatever, like the way we are thinking of, is build that capacity in-house. And the other segment that obviously would come into picture is collaborations. Yeah, it has to be a collaborative field where everybody needs to have that awareness, first of all, that data sets are complementary. They are all part of the same jigsaw puzzle, and if you marry them the right way, the solutions are, or let's say the best way to put it, the sum is more than the sum of its parts. Like it's way much more. It's just 1 + 1 becomes probably 3 or 4. It will happen like that, and that is very unique in itself. The level of insights. We are in a phase of awareness. Let me put it that it's not an emerging field anymore. That we're gone way past that. We are now in a field of being more self-aware, is understanding that where it makes more commercial sense, how to find the right product market fit, and what is that GTM strategy, whether it is through partnerships, either it may be through big software enterprise providers, like, you have Accenture, like, for example, recently investing into Pixel. So these are the kind of trends which will pick up more, is in understanding that don't try to do it all necessarily. Build that right collaboration, right framework, and work with others.
All right, so it's been a fascinating half an hour plus talking to you. Maybe one last final question before we end. Given that you already have plans for the next 3 to 5 years, clearly, what do you see yourself achieving in the next 10-year time frame as impact across the sector?
Okay, so this is where the foundation of KaleidEO came from, the understanding that we want to deliver value from every bit downloaded from space. So it will always be our endeavor that whatever we send and the data we collect has a purpose. We are not going to let it rot in cloud. We don't want that. So whatever data that we want to image and do is going to be entirely customer and industry based decision making. So it has to be a collaborative. We understand your problems. We want to talk to you and build the right solution that fits for you. Beyond that, yes, increasing the entire capability and unlocking new markets and market fits, both. So in terms of geographies, we want to make our presence in a lot of the new segments. Obviously, that would mean going and trying to work in other developed and so-called Western countries also, which we recently did with SatSure as part of the OCI acquisition. But beyond that, in the technology side of very specific things, we want to add new sensor portfolios, build more AI/ML insight-based solution building, because you can leverage so much data from space if you have a cloud capability there. So if that picks up a lot more as is anticipated, and we are very gung-ho about it, is we have more teraflops of capacity building in space of processing or churning out more image analytics, then that is brilliant for us, because we can access more data, we can give you more insights at scale, at value, and seamlessly.
So Arpan, thank you very much for spending the time with us and talking extensively about your plans. I think what you guys are doing is, extremely ambitious, and obviously, you're doing it at scale. So I wish you very good luck in building through the process. And I think SatSure and KaleidEO both stand as one of the torchbearers for new space in India. So I think you guys are proving a very big point that private sector and new space in India can build very large businesses based on satellite as well as space applications that not just serve the local market, but to scales to the entire world in that sense. So congratulations on all the progress, and I look forward to maybe doing another episode in a couple of years as you're ready getting to the launch pad and see what the excitement is like at that point of time. Thank you again.
Thank you, NP, for having me here.